Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the modern market, where every day we discuss everything to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and the alt L1 market. SUI and Hype, absolutely cooking. And also for discussion, any other ways we can try to make some or a lot of money on the internet. Loaded up for discussion today. Got SUI breaking all-time high, up 25% to $4.7, and Hype continues to chase it, up 30% to $18. Trump's World Liberty Finance Wallet is investing in ETH, Link, and Aave. The president of the United States is investing in your coins. I hope. Well, question is, are you selling while the president is buying? Number 3, Pudgy Penguins hit $100,000 floor. Been speaking about the Penguins and the Pengu token a lot. Just a quick update there. A few reflections from us. We've also got the latest on price action on crypto and NFTs as usual, and a discussion on a bit of a creator focus today, which we'll get to in just a little bit. So stay tuned for that. Got Sammy with us today, as well as Bread. Cannot wait to get into the discussion. But before we do that, just a reminder, friends, that nothing that we say is financial advice, unfortunately, because we don't know anything for sure. This market is very, very risky. So we're just kind of making stuff up as we go along, and we hope that is entertaining / informative for you. With that out of the way, Bread, it is Thursday. It is the 12th of December. You're in Milan, looking at a pretty stylish, historical, very authentic atmosphere I'm seeing resonating from your Italian veranda, perhaps.
What a charitable entrance that was for this place. Yes, it's old. I think it's what you were trying to say there. It's an old place. I got some art
There's an
over
old
there.
wooden
Don't
cupboard.
mind my. There's several wooden cupboards actually. That is one of the things, like spending time in Europe, come as an American, like shaping your head around like how old shit can actually be in the world is kind of a revelation. I mean, I've been living in Europe for 4 or 5 years across whatever, but still, like, you sit there and you talk to people like, oh yeah, this house is 300 years old. Like, oh, literally not possible where I'm from. Like, not even a thing. So yeah, it's kind of fun to like see how old shit is and how normalized that is.
Yeah, it's a funny concept, I guess. Which I was listening to a different podcast the other day where it was actually Mark Andreessen speaking on the Joe Rogan podcast, and we're talking about history and how this was his assessment, and I thought it was an interesting assessment to make. He said in his opinion, Americans didn't quite get how deep history runs for other people, and I think it was in context of some time where he got in a fight with like the whole of India because he said something about India and its history with colonialism. And like, obviously there's like a long history between the British Empire and what happened in India and how they gained their independence and all this stuff, which for the American mind, in his opinion, was like, well, we just don't really have to. I mean, there's obviously a history, but you'd have to deal with those like century old tensions that have now seeped through down generations. Like, it doesn't really exist in that same way, right? So interesting concept.
Yeah. So it's generally just like that, the mental side, but then also like the architectural shit. We're like, we don't have wonders in America, right? So like being out here, like, so on top of like the cultural shit that you see, like we see buildings and architecture here that's just like that'll never exist in America. We'll never make any of that over there. Like, we'll make new modern shit, but it's just, yeah, kind of warps your brain a little bit.
I love it. Sometimes I look around at the old stuff though, Brad, and I think we're never going to see any of this stuff again. Like, I don't know if anyone has the wealth that was accumulated by like top European nation states to build that same stuff. I don't know if it's possible.
You know what? I had this with walking around Vienna with Legendary, right? I'm walking around, I'm looking at these big fucking castles and stuff, and I'm like, there was a point in time where someone could just like stand here. This thing was fucking huge, and people were just like, this is mine. This is all me, and everyone has to respect it, and don't fucking come here. And like, I guess we have like that to a degree now, but like, you see people walking around, it's all cultural and like it's kind of a cumulative like community thing now. But like, yeah, back in the day, it was just like everyone's just like, yeah, that's that dude's like mountain over there. We just don't touch it.
One of my most controversial takes, and of course, we're going to get into the main headlines. We're going to get into the main stories as well. But maybe this is linked to the aspirational generational wealth we're trying to get to. Anyway, one of my most controversial takes, Brad, I don't know if I've shared this with you before, is that people talk about wealth disparity, and because the gap keeps growing. But arguably, in order to build this stuff, you actually need more disparity. Like, you need more disparity for people to like, no one can build those castles anymore. No one can literally just be like, I want a castle. You know, you walk around Europe, every place has got like a damn castle. Um, it's not possible anymore because there's not enough concentration of wealth. And arguably, in order to have those things again, that's what you would need. Not saying you should necessarily do that, but like, it's funny how in order to achieve those things, you actually need such a crazy concentration of capital in a few people's hands to create probably some of the most beautiful things. You've
But
seen Sam Bates come in.
it even has like on the micro scale, like you look at some of the houses in London and you're like, someone owned that small house at one point and now it's been put into 4 flats.
Exactly. This is
And I'm just
exactly my point as well.
yeah, the
No
disparity
one
is
can
getting
afford
worse.
to have, no one can afford to live in London in those big houses that used to be like town houses. They're all flats now. People have to like turn them into flats because they think it's more profitable. Rich people don't worry about whether things are profitable or not. They just live there because they don't have to worry about that, you know? So I don't know.
That
That's
was
my thought.
your disparity thing was the gusto on the castle thing, because I was like, this is way back in the day, right? Also, like the upper bound was this dude owning a mountainside with a castle and like infinite stuff, and he's like, all right, thanks for planting my trees, go live in your hut. Like the lower bound is literally just like, you're in a hut over there, like go hang out, and like you can come over tomorrow if I let you. It's just crazy.
Absolutely crazy. Look, a nice little intro. I think this is entirely relevant. Entirely relevant. We're all obviously aiming for our own kingdoms or castles by the end of this cycle. That is the objective, without a doubt. So let's get into the price action to understand how close we are to achieving those objectives. Starting with the majors, as always. Remember, I'm showing this on screen for people who are watching in. We're live on X video and on YouTube as well, if you prefer watching with us. We've got Bitcoin is up a couple of percent, reclaimed 100K probably quite quietly yesterday because the fact of Pudgy Penguins actually overtaking one Pudgy Penguin being more valuable than one Bitcoin now. So yeah, we reclaimed Bitcoin 100K quite comfortably yesterday, up 2%. ETH is actually running again, up almost 6%, back to around 3.9K, not quite at the 4K levels that we saw last week. We've got Solana up a couple of percent too at $230. Although the bigger news probably on the kind of alts we'll come to in a second. In terms of the memes, let's just touch in over there. We've got things seem like relatively flat. Doge is down 1% still at that 40-cent level, which seems to be real support for Doge. Pepe's down. Oh, sorry, it's just flipped again. Let me just upload the screen just to make sure it's accurate. Pepe's actually up almost 5%. WIF's up almost 4%, back over $3. Really sold off quite hard in the last few days. We've got Popcat up a couple of percent, Mogs down 7%, AI16Z up 15% as well. We'll throw to Sam in a little bit for an AI update. Goat's up 17%. So AI continuing to seem strong according to these numbers, but Sam will catch us up in just a little bit. Getting into the headlines themselves, we've got SUI breaking all-time high, up 25% to $4.7. And you've got Hype continuing to chase, up 30% to $18. Got to break those two down a little bit in a bit more detail later in today's show, because those moves are much greater than what you're seeing on the other majors. And I wonder how many people are going slightly down the risk curve into these alt L1s now to kind of look for the new soul, to be honest. I think that's obviously been one of the ideas happening with SUI for a bit. I've seen people talk about Hype in the same way to some extent, but let's clarify those narratives a little bit later in the show. We've got Trump also bidding ETH, Link, and Aave. Bread's going to break down a little bit later in the show. The type of numbers we're looking at, how much is being bought, what that kind of means for ETH in particular, because that's where that activity is taking place. And then, as we said, big headline, Pudgy Penguins hit the 100K floor. Nice little bit of news here, which you might want to investigate if you're a Pudgy holder. Agents, who is part of the team, shared that you might actually still be able to mint a little Pudgy for free. The supply of lils is 22,222. And unlike the rods, the original team decided to keep the contract open indefinitely. So some people have not minted. You might want to go check if your penguin has a little Pudgy available to claim. Some notable sales from around the space. CryptoPunk Cowboy sold for 68 ETH, showing that on screen. You had a Azuki Golden Frog selling for 50 ETH, and a rare Pepe Nakamoto sold for 42.69 ETH. NFT market is hot. Moving over to Mintify to take a look over there. We've got Penguins up 6% to 27.3 ETH. Doodles up to 4.4 ETH when I last checked. Sometimes these numbers are a little off. Doodles are up, according to 70% in the last 24 hours to 4.4 ETH. We've got Azuki up to 9.2 ETH, also up 35% in the last 24 hours. So these collections that don't have tokens yet, which, I mean, Azuki have anime kind of confirmed. Doodles, I am not aware of any confirmed news that they will have a token, but these like strong IP NFTs are really moving. Actually, even Memeland is up 20% up back to 2.7. They've got their token out already. So people are just running on NFTs. Sappy Seals up 14%. Really moving across the board. Quite impressive to see. So that's on the NFT side. Getting into the rest of the news, getting up to with everything else. We've got Virtuals on the AI side. Remember, Virtuals being one of the premier AI launch pads for agents, announced that AI agents can now join Google Meets. This is pretty cool. So this is like someone shared a video of Luna, the kind of the first AI agent conversing on the Google Meet. Also, Phantom announced ability to discover pump fund and moonshot tokens within minutes of launching. I suspect that is good for those tokens. People are always positive about the Phantom UX in the wallet on Solana. Virtuals announces Agent Sandbox as well, an infinite simulation playground for agents on Virtuals. Maybe Sam can speak to that in a little bit. Solana announces 8 city takeovers in the US for 2025. I've seen a lot of teams looking forward now to their 2025 plans. Echo's Latent Ink collection sells out 72 extra large for between 0.5 ETH to 1 ETH, some secondary action at 5 ETH. Good to see like digital art, high quality digital art selling successfully. Mockaverse announced second Mocha drop for Mockaverse stakers. And finally, On Cyber announces continuation under a new banner as bear market wrecked the original dream. On Cyber kind of producing this 3D digital world where you could kind of interact with your digital objects. Didn't work out in the way they intended, but they're going to attempt to keep the dream alive. So that's the main headlines and the rest of the roundup. Before we get into the main stuff, Sammy, anything catching your attention in particular? What is interesting you?
There's a couple of things, but before I touch on the AI stuff, I think the one question I have for you is how much would you price the left-facing Pudgy at now? Because I think it last traded for about 400 ETH. I don't know if it was Bogfather and whether he still holds it, but that was trading for 400 ETH a little while ago when ETH was a lot less than it is now as well. So I've seen people range it around. Actually, you guess first what you think it might be worth, and then I'll say what some other people have said.
So for clarification, the left-facing Pudgy is a one of one in the collection, right? There's no other left-facing Pudgy. People might be listening to this thinking that the NFT universe is completely crazy. They might be right. So there's only one left-facing Pudgy Penguin in the whole collection. It was bought for 400 ETH, which might have been around what price at the time, Sammy?
I want to say like 2.5. So you're probably looking about 800K to a mil.
Okay, so it's around. I mean, I think that's fair, but then I think Pudgies still go higher from here. So I don't know, one of one, a few mil, 5 mil. Is that outrageous?
I think it's going to be 8 figures.
I saw this funny thing the other day where, and I'm sure lots of people will relate to this, where we're getting to the point in the cycle where like I think people's targets for stuff might start to get hit relatively soon, if not already. And the thing that everyone is going to do almost without fail is just raise the targets. Like they're just going to raise the targets. I saw that with Hype already. I think it was D's tweet, canceling my sells. Think we go higher from here. You know, it's that type of moment. Brad,
I can't hear you say that without thinking of Tyler D. He's like, he talks about meme coins a lot, and he always just goes, raising my targets. I'm raising my targets because he gets bullish and starts doing stuff. And he and I have painted ourselves into a corner doing that a few times. We're like, oh, we're raising our targets, and then we end up bag holding for a very long time. So, you know, tale as old as time, I guess.
Tale as old as time. Absolutely, that is for sure. Sam, before we get into the main headlines and some other stuff, Definitely want to hear your update on the agent side.
Yeah, so I did daily analysis. I don't know if you want to just pull it up from the, and I can talk to it, but from a high level, so ChatGPT, they had an outage. So any agents that are built on that LLM had some difficulties and some outages. I think you might have seen Grok kind of roast it, basically quote tweeted that announcement and just basically said, yeah, come to Grok instead. And then obviously there's like that, the glasses have been put on the Grok symbol. Yeah, so you can see that there. So it's almost like the merked. I don't know what that's called, but there was obviously trolling.
Wait, Grok quote tweeted you?
Not me. No, they quote tweeted the Open AI announcement that they were down.
That's good
trolling. And there's obviously the spat between Musk and Sam Altman around the not-for-profit stuff. So there's obviously a bit of rivalry going on there. But that's just like the headline thing. And obviously AI agents that are built on that were kind of impacted by it. But a lot of the agents that we kind of interact with are Llama, which is Meta. But yeah, some other highlights. So we touched on virtuals, which they're retesting those all-time highs. I think they were close to 2 billion again when I last checked. But they've deployed so Agent Starter, which is like a more customized way of launching agents. And I think we saw Yellow Panther launch one yesterday, airdropping some of his tokens to a bunch of other projects, but also, so it's slightly different to how you typically launch them through that bonding curve. You can actually allocate tokens as like an airdrop kind of method.
That's interesting.
We saw that previously with a few others, but that was notable. And then also the sandbox, which you touched on, which is effectively a slightly different framework where you can kind of deploy virtuals agents within a different contextual environment. So like more of a gaming environment. So they use the Westworld example as like the environment that they're effectively allowing you to plug into. So that was quite interesting. You've got AI XBT is getting a bit of personality. He roasted someone on the timeline. I'm not going to say exactly what he said because it's quite rude, but that went a little bit viral. I think AI16Z's had some smart money deployed into it as well. So that's the other framework on the Solana side that's kind of backed by Shore, and it's quite open source. I think those are the headlines.
Any price highlights? It seems from a high level, looking from afar, that the bounce that we talked about yesterday, where the price is going back up, seems to have like been sustained, is continued a little. Is it just tracking the rest of the market now? Because like that's kind of what happened in the rest of the market too. Or do you think the bounce has been a bit more profound?
Well, I think there's a lot of attention on the AI sector, and I could probably see this as being an alt sector. And I think because Bitcoin dominance has dropped and some of the other alts that you mentioned, like SUI, and those alt L1s are kind of popping off as well. So I kind of see AI as another vertical within that altcoin cycle thing. But I think it's slightly separate because you don't necessarily have those price targets, the ceilings. So you don't know how high it can go. Like, I mean, Virtual's at 2 billion, but who's to say that it can go a lot higher, especially as it rolls out more developments and things that we haven't seen. But there's a lot of Web2 protocols that or Web2 platforms that I'm talking to that are trying to enter the Web3 space. They're trying to connect that. And they've got, I didn't realize this, but they've got hundreds of thousands of AI agents from like a Web2 standpoint, but just don't have tokens and things. So they're just trying to figure out how to connect the two and bootstrap that. So we haven't necessarily seen that come to market yet. So we talk about like, I don't know, Virtual's launching 1,000 agents a day or whatever. That's like minuscule and compared to like the number of agents that are in existence outside of Web3. So we haven't necessarily seen the impact of that, and then the collaborations that could form and the DeFi integration. So we saw today, I think the first autonomous agent-to-agent interaction using the Chaos token. So I think that was between Rogue, which is the Rogan show ripoff podcast agent thing, with Saint, which is like another Saint Satoshi, which is another virtuals based agent. So that was just interesting. But yeah, it's obviously evolving. The price action, the main movers were, I think, Fartcoin was continuing to grow. You had Goat got listed on Kraken, so that pushed back above 800 mil. That's been above $1 billion previously. You've got AIXBT kind of sustaining that back up to about 230. Yeah, so it's a bit of a bounce. It's sustaining. I think there's a few developments coming through, so it's just an interesting space to watch.
I think it's so exciting, honestly. Excellent summary as always. As Sam said, does that AI agent update every single day, must follow. Everyone in the space is following that specifically. really exciting for the whole space to have this AI X crypto moment where, you know, you can kind of unlock this new aspect of the economy. Really exciting development. So, Brad, do you want us to come in before we move on?
Yeah, this is kind of a fundamental question, and maybe we'll take this up another show. But we're talking about these LLMs going down and it crippling a bunch of these agents. I've seen people pose the question of like, can any of these agents hold up against just the unplug attack, right? Like the creator unplugs them and runs off the money, does whatever they have ultimate control over this stuff. Is there a world, and again, we can take this up later if we need to, but is there a world where, because the entire point of crypto is to create these systems where they are unstoppable, right? They're censorship resistant, they're like all this shit, right? Is there a world where we eventually get the LLM to actually exist on chain and be unpluggable so that these agents become, persistent?
Well, I've had discussions with various protocols about it. I think the Eternal AI, they're suggesting having like agents that are fully on chain. And that's tied to there's like an NFT drop that's going to happen that are supposed to be PFPs for AI agents, like the first of its kind. That's supposed to be imminent. So that's the same project that's doing that. But their selling point is that the agents are fully on chain. I don't know what that means in terms of like the actual LLM, or whether because I think most of these agents are off chain, but then they have on-chain elements to it in terms of like transacting and stuff, or a token. But then I just don't know in terms of like how prohibitive that is for, like, if it's fully on chain, it obviously means that's a lot of compute to be putting through, like on Bitcoins especially, or like ETH, or like they probably have to be on like a less decentralized chain, like more decentralized chain, just because of the scalability. Like I just don't know. I don't have answers to that question yet, but I agree. It's like, what's the disaster recovery plan for these? Because if you end up having agents that are in time with like traditional industries and then they go down, you're going to have some pretty massive chaos events that happen. So it's definitely a question that people are asking.
Like it. Very interesting stuff. We're obviously going to keep on top of all AI agent developments and the financial aspects to them as we move forward. Going to be a really exciting aspect of the on-chain economy moving forward. Let's keep it moving. Before we get into the main headlines for today, remember we've got SUI coming up. We've got Hype. We're going to talk about Trump's ETH buys, and we've got Pudgy Penguins hitting the 100K floor. Let's just get into our entrepreneurial segment for the week, sponsored by Little Nouns, of course. It's called Publish and Profit, where we explain some of the key secrets and tips to making money online as a creator. Today, we'll focus on the importance of doubling down when you have become established creating content in a niche. This is brought to you by Little Nouns and Expansion DAO, if you don't know, based on the famous Nouns DAO, who fund cool creative endeavors which can proliferate the Nounish meme. Now, the reason why I've been thinking about this for the show the last quarter is because we noticed all of our videos increasing in views on YouTube over time, and we know the show is going well, and we already go live on X Video, YouTube, and upload after the show to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. But the question we've been really trying to consider is like, how can we give people more of what they want in the most efficient way possible? And we already work with an editor who helps us with one short per day for YouTube Shorts and a clip for X. But we thought, do you know what? If people miss the live show, maybe the catching up purely live isn't the optimum way to consume the content. So maybe highlight videos would be better. So the way we decided to double down was start cutting the best combo from each show. So this is what we will do for today's show as well. Maybe the 5 to 10 minutes that we think after the show was the best bit that everyone would want to capture each day, and upload that as a separate video. And these are actually starting to hit now, with some of them hitting hundreds of views, which is great for us as a start. Like on YouTube, we're still very much building out, but some of those videos are doing numbers. So Sam, since your AI agent roundups, since you've been doing them, I've noticed you double down on that content as well, and kind of figure out how to give your audience more of what they want. As a creator, what are your tips to kind of double down and proliferate the content that you already create?
Well, I think my content's quite deep. Like it goes into quite heavy analysis, so it's not for the faint-hearted all the time. And I do get that question, like, do you have something that's more high level? And I do a newsletter, so on a weekly basis, I do a recap of everything I've done. But even that's pretty lengthy. So what I tend to do is then cut out that key sections from that, or the key points, put that into like article format on Twitter, and give like a more concise version. And that seems to do relatively well. Whereas previously, when I used to copy what was in the newsletter onto Twitter, it just wouldn't get the engagement because the attention span is different. Like people go to a newsletter probably to spend that time reading about what's going on in depth. On Twitter, they'll probably see an article, start flicking through it, and then get bored after 20 seconds. And I think people's attention span shifts depending on the platform they're on. And that's why, like, even with the daily roundups that I do for that analysis, like that leans into smart engagement versus like market cap. But then there's a load of other stuff that is actually pretty interesting that can be carved out separately in a different thread. And that appeals to a completely different audience. So it's just trying to work out, okay, well, what's the interesting stuff? How do you present it in a concise way and a form that's like engaging? Because everyone's different in terms of how they consume that. And I think just appealing to a wider audience, like it definitely helps.
I like it. I think you've been doing an awesome job kind of cutting out the best bits, repurposing, and just giving your audience more of what they want. So I think that's a good, important thing. We know we've got a lot of creators in the audience with us too. I think it's really important to keep in mind. Hope that's a helpful insight, a little bit behind the scenes of how we are operating. Shout out to Lil Nouns DAO for sponsoring that segment. As we said, they are an expansion DAO based on the famous Nouns DAO who fund cool creative endeavors which can proliferate the Nounish meme. They have also been one of our biggest supporters over the years, and I'd highly recommend checking them out as a place first to vibe in the Nounish culture and as a gateway to the Nouns ecosystem. Right, let's get into the main headlines for today. We've got this huge price action on SUI and Hype. So the majors are looking good. Bitcoin reclaimed 100K. ETH is up 5% to back to 3.9K. Solana's up 4-5% as well. But the big moves right now are happening in these alt L1s. So we have SUI going up to $4.70. This is a new all-time high. It's up 25%, showing the chart on the screen for the people who are watching in. These charts are pretty tasty as well. If you're looking back 3 months, 3 months ago, SUI was at $1. Not bad at all. And yeah, really not bad at all. So SUI was $1 3 months ago, pushing $5 now. You've also got Hype, which, I mean, everyone knows what's happened with Hype. Most recently came out, I don't even know, was it 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? Came out like $2, $3, has just been on a complete tear up to almost $18 now, up 25% on the day, up 30% on the week. I don't even know what the number. CoinGecko doesn't even have a percentage for its increase in since its inception because it started so low and it's gone up so rapidly. But what's going on here? This is the bigger question, right? What is going on here? Why have these become such important bets? I think for SUI, this has been a thesis shared by two people who I found quite notable. Marty, who is the guy, I mean, I'm pretty sure this person is like very significant, has been doing crypto much longer than any of us, but the way that I have become familiar with him is via Mando's appearances on his show. I'm just going to share his account on Twitter because I think it's the helpful one to see. Marty is at Marty Party on music, at Marty Party Music, sorry. Been sharing this like SUI thesis for a long time as an alt L1, and also Raoul Pal has been talking big on SUI for a long time. It's quite fast. It's really good. It works really well. I actually downloaded my SUI wallet for the first time very recently because this is not a trader that I've been a part of. But it seems to be doing really nicely. It's a good alt L1, a favorite for investors. But then Hype, on the other hand, so just for context, SUI, with all of that packaged in, is at a $47 billion FTV. Market cap's at 13 bill. The thing about Hype is that there's two fundamental parts of this narrative which has formed. And this is actually a trade that I am in, not in as much as I should be, but in a little bit. So just disclosing that. Two narratives after listening to Flood's interview on Rect Radio that is strongest for Hype moving forward. One is the alt L1, like there's an L1 narrative that's going to come, which I don't actually think is entirely priced in at the moment. Then there's also the fact that they are literally trying to be, in the same way we spoke about Magic Eden the other day, on-chain Binance, huge, colossal volume moving through Hyperliquid, all kinds of trading taking place there, really, really crushing it on that front. and as a consequence, they have got up to a 18 billion FDV as things stand. So the trade here, according to everyone else, or this is like me aggregating all of the views that I've seen, trying to come to the appropriate conclusion, is there's two things happening in Hyperliquid. That one is the alt L1, which is probably going to be very valuable if you can attract all this attention. But you've also got the actual activity, the real users, the real financial activity happening in big numbers, which is incredibly, incredibly valuable. And therefore, if you were to look at something like SUI as an alt L1, which is probably a 3x away from here, I mean, I've seen people try to put BNB in the conversation as a alternative perspective, from the perspective that, like, look, BNB is a token for Binance. You know, is that a better comparison given there's all of this on-chain trading activity? BNB's valuation is obviously crazy high compared to SUI, which, and you know, even Solana's in the conversation as a reasonable comparison. So this is why, this is me trying to explain why this has been moving in the way that it has. Remember, the key other factors here is that there are no VCs. Like, this is a clear distinguishing factor where there will not be that tremendous sell pressure from VCs who maybe got in at a very, very low price because there aren't any. What there might be later on, to be fair, is all of the users who have got incredibly rich off that initial airdrop. They airdropped a third of the supply to people, which means that at an $18 billion valuation and a third of the supply going to the community, that's looking like a $6 billion airdrop at current valuations. Admittedly, some people have sold at lower valuations, but that is seriously, seriously significant numbers, which I think actually buys loyalty for quite a long time. So, you know, maybe some very wealthy airdrop people dump at some point in time. Maybe they already have. That's probably the sell pressure you might encounter at some point in time. But for the moment, it looks like they've bought that loyalty and people want to see this go much, much higher. That's my assessment of the situation. I've just seen there's a lot of, while I've been focusing on that, I've seen there's a lot of YouTube comments, which I'm going to start looking at, but I want to throw to Bread first. You know, obviously you're building Mega ETH, so you're must be familiar with what's going on with Hyperliquid. What are your thoughts on this SUI, like the way I framed it, which is like this is going on with SUI, this is going on with Hyperliquid, kind of got its sights on Solana, maybe potentially. How have I framed that up? What are your thoughts?
I think you've summarized the other theses well. I think some of the stuff that could be thrown on top of this, like, yeah, it's just like a fast, easy SUI chain, whatever, that, like that narrative. I think the distinguishing factor from a technical perspective is the Move language, right? Like, that's, everyone perceives Move, which is what SUI is built on, which came previously from the Libra financing people, Meta, who, you know, Facebook, they built a stable coin, they developed Libra, and then the Move language, that's actually what Movement just had big airdrops, same thing, that's trying to bring the Move language, which is perceived as like the optimal future looking programming language for blockchain. So like that's its big thing. So it's founding team from Meta. They left Meta to go do that. They have Move as the language, which is seen as the premier language, the future of blockchain languages. It's very small in user base, but it is perceived as the better one. And then, like, yes, the UI has some unique stuff like ZK login and some other stuff. So it's supposed to be a slick UX. So yes, the play, I think there is, people missed the Solana trade. It's been going on for the last, 2 years at this point. So they're looking for the next Solana. And then they're saying, look, this is a good candidate for that. I know, was it 2 months ago, 3 months ago, there was a bunch of drama on the timeline about like KOLs got a bunch of allocation because they all started shilling, including you mentioned Raul Paul. Everyone started shilling SUI immediately on like one day.
Kind of suspiciously in a way, right?
Yeah. Like, okay, everyone got their allocation, or like their marketing budget. So there's that. And then the Hyperliquid thing, yeah, like its trajectory has been so different that, because like, remember, it started off as like you had the Arbitrum bridge, which led to it, and it was like a validator of like only one or two things. Everyone kind of perceived it as like an L3 kind of loosely in their head. Then like, oh, wait, now this thing's an L1. And with that becomes a valuation bump of everything else. And it already has a product. Therefore, that's great. Like, it has the demand before it has the chain, which is, great. And then obviously wealth effects of the users now that it's actually like kind of taking shape. And with like the wealth effects of your starting users has been a lost art for some time now, right? Like everyone's doing this high FDV community allocations between like 5 and 6%, and then like it's down only on DGE because they did a $200 million raise the last couple of years leading up to it. So like there's a lot of stigma associated with that, and kind of flip the script. Now, like the downside, like everyone sees this stuff and says like, oh, like how are they able to do this? Why didn't everyone just do this? And it's because there was a prevailing theory. Like, remember, these chains only have so many tokens to give away typically, right?
Yes.
So like this is giving away equity in your company, or was perceived this way. So like there's only so many shots you can do. And if you give away a shit ton of equity up front to the community, they're like, well, you lose some down the road stuff for your actual chain, like as a founding team, whatever, like you lose that. So there was some pushback over the last few years where people were like, yeah, like founders don't give away your equity like day one, like that's yours, you should do whatever. But the perceived, like the theory here is you give it away, it builds wealth effects. Everyone launches, the total valuation of what your system is higher. Therefore, your smaller amount of tokens are worth more because you went this route. So they're kind of going totally opposite direction there.
I love it. I think this is really, really helpful to hear that kind of alternative perspective as well. Great additional points. The one thing I would say to the fact that the founders have given away, potentially a lot, and there's maybe, to the extent that you're raising like a question mark about that, the thing that I would want to check, and I don't have the numbers here, maybe Rune Lord in the YouTube comments has it, because I know this guy is on a hype train at the moment, judging by the rest of his comments and what I know. Is that my understanding is they've been like buying it back like crazy. It's like, look, we're going to give it to you, and if you're going to sell it to us for $2 to $3 to $4 to $5 to $6 to $10, like we're just going to buy this back from you. So don't worry about that, because we're gonna own our own network. We're just going to buy it all back from you if you're going to be silly enough to sell it to us. So I don't actually know those numbers, but I know that they were buying it in huge size. I think even as recent as like a few days ago. And I think it's just like an ongoing thing that they're doing. So I would need to double check that and find that number, because I think that would be important. Okay. I did say I wanted to go to the YouTube comments, because I think you can't get much past our YouTube commentors. Pretty smart stuff here. Overarch agree, like basically making the same point as you, Brad. SUI is purely Raw Pal. No one would know about it otherwise. There was definitely that moment in time where everyone just started getting loud about SUI. And then Rune Lord trying to push the narrative. Like, look, I'm just trying to convey the narrative. I'm not putting this out there and saying that this is what it is. But BNB is part of the equation. Hype is more than an exchange token. Hype equals SOL plus BNB. Now, to be clear, I do not think that means you take the SOL valuation and then you add the BNB valuation. And then
why not? It's a bull market. B-check. Where's your imagination?
Look, I had to share it because that is one position that is out there. Whether the math actually,
I will say, yeah, on the BNB stuff, you mentioned that earlier. Like, yeah, a little bit different value props, right? Because like, yes, I get it, Sex on chain, BNB, whatever, but like BNB, the chain is just like an Ethereum fork that's juiced really high. Like we're all talking about like increasing the gas on Ethereum. That's literally what BNB and now some of the L2s on BNB do. They just got a chain and they just juice the gas really, really high. And it almost created a lot of problems because of the way they did it. And so it's just like a kind of a normal chain, just on steroids. And it's not really built to be a sex on chain, which is what Hyperliquid is. So like a little bit different. And then like obviously all the value from BNB is coming from all these people that are doing the launch pad stuff and then getting the tokens that way. It's not coming from like the chain actually being effective. It's from the token and the power of Binance driving value to the token through the launch pools and through everything else, and having the off-chain sex that does stuff. So yes, if you squint, but it's totally different value props in my mind.
I wonder if you're so, oh, sorry, Sam, go for it.
Well, I was probably going to ask the same question as you. Like, would Hyperliquid do the same thing by doing launch pads and
stuff?
Yeah, exactly. Like if you've got all this demand,
think so, right?
Yeah, the demand for the token alone, like people just wouldn't sell it then. It would keep going up, and then you get dividends from all these tokens that go there rather than Binance.
I think it's so natural. Like, although nothing has been confirmed, because I've been diving into this quite a lot, listening to a lot of people's conversations, nothing's been confirmed, RE staking, but that is what the community is aggressively hungry for. Once you have people staking and you know that there's already a bunch of teams building out for the L1, or building out on Hype EVM, I think it's the natural it's the natural thing, right? When you've got all these people holding your token, they do not want to sell it. They just want you to let them stake it. And then I think it's the natural thing. Although, as I said, none of that has been confirmed 100% yet. I really want to get into the Trump buying ETH stuff because I know Bread's got some great takes on that. And then we will touch on our routine Pudgy Penguin chat, given that it went past 100K. I feel like we've got to give that a word, and maybe even a touch on Doodles, to be honest, given their huge move. But I just want to check in with Phunky first. Welcome to the stage, my friend. I know you're super clued up on all of this kind of alt-1 conversation. What's your take on either SUI, Hype, or the two put together?
Thanks so much, B. Yeah, I just really wanted to chime in, especially on the SUI side of things, for a couple different reasons. It is, full disclosure, my biggest alt bag, because I really do believe, and I think that this thesis will play out, that if sort of Solana is the ETH of last cycle, that SUI is going to be the Solana of last cycle.
I thought Hype is the Solana. Oh no, Hype is the SUI of 2 weeks ago. Maybe that's what it is.
It may be true. Maybe in our crazy time warp land, yes. But the reason I bring this up is because our senior software dev, she was a Solana dev. She still does stuff. Bread, she's the one that you interacted with yesterday, Jessica, because I asked her about that soul scan thing. She followed the devs. The short line to this, if you want a successful chain, follow the devs. If the devs are flocking to your chain because they love building on it, and I'm telling you, the hardcore Rust nerds love Move as a language for a lot of different reasons. And so I started talking to her, started recruiting her to come to our company in April of 23. And one of the first conversations she had, she's like, have you been paying attention to SUI, like what they're building and blah, blah, blah. She said, a lot of the Solana devs are making their way over to SUI. They're still building stuff on Solana, but they love SUI as a brand new blank canvas. And just where development activity goes, so do great apps, so do great UIs, UXs. People will follow. So I was buying SUI well under $1. It got to like $2. It went down to $1 during one of the Bitcoin crashes. And I doubled down and I bought a whole bunch more because I really think that this team knows what they're doing. They're tracking the right devs. And then Misten Labs on top of this, don't sleep on Walrus Nodes. This Misten Labs team, which is the parent of SUI, is now building out a decentralized storage solution. I mean, pure speculation on my part, but I wouldn't be surprised to see if SUI stakers get a future wall airdrop. But I just pay attention to SUI. I would not sleep on SUI at all.
Okay. So that move, excellent information, Phunky. Always appreciate your insight. 2 immediate comments. One is, it sounds like the move language is something which is quite attractive to people. So that is something I'm looking out for. And the second thing, just to shout out Phunky again for the people who are maybe less familiar with Phunky. Phunky will say things about, Phunky will mention things like Walrus, and your immediate reaction will be like, what the hell is Walrus, You'll be thinking this is not anything that I've seen on the timeline, blah, 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 blah. But you have to pay attention because at some point in time, this stuff will become relevant. And Phunky will have told you like ages ago, and then you'll realize later that it was actually really interesting / important. So shout out to Phunky for providing that in-depth analysis as well.
I have a question actually. So you mentioned Rust as a language. There was actually an AI agent framework that ran yesterday, I think to like 40 mil within a couple of hours, and that was supposed to be the Rust of LLMs. So is Rust like the I'm not a developer, so I don't know the extent to which developers use certain coding languages. It's probably a question for Phunky. Like, is that like a way that people can onboard users or the developers into their space, like specific languages that aren't necessarily used in crypto?
So when it comes to Rust, this is, people think of it and they hear it in the context of blockchain, and it's not just this. If I remember correctly, the Mozilla Foundation developed Rust as a language, which was then used to create Firefox and everything else because of its security. Big Web2 companies like Google, Amazon, they all use Rust because Rust is so secure as a programming language. My understanding as a non-dev is that it's not easy to master, that it's something that takes time for you to learn. But once you have the framework down, you can build much more secure apps. So this is why we're starting to see so many blockchains pivot to Rust-based programming because of that security. And then Move as a language because Rust is sort of like the substrate, if you will. Move as a language adds even more security to it because it's an object-oriented language and all sorts of stuff that Jessica could tell you about that I really don't understand beyond on a conceptual level. But yes, I think you're going to continue to see Rust be sort of the underpinning of all blockchain ecosystems. And it, most of them already are, unless they're legacy systems that have been around for a long time.
Love it. Appreciate the extra analysis, Phunky, extra explanation. But guys, we got to move on. That L1 thing, obviously we're watching it. We'll keep reporting on it as it remains interesting and important to us. Let's keep it moving though. Brad, the president of the United States keeps piling into ETH and ETH coins. Please tell us about it, what it means for us, what it means for you. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, hitting it quick. So the headline for this one was Trump's World Liberty Finance wallet investing in ETH, Link, and Aave. What it's coming from, and I gave you some links so you can look at the Dune dashboard. So summary for everyone who doesn't remember, World Liberty Finance is the program or the ETH L1 deployment of an Aave fork, Aave lending protocol, that is represented by the Trump family. And it launched back on October 15th. And that's when the initial mint was. They tried to mint for $300 million. They did not get that much money. The initial mint, I think, looking at the numbers, had about $13 million that they get. But if you look at the Dune dashboard that I sent you, you can see that they've, over time, seen bumps in the actual mint amount. So a little bit down, that actual chart there is showing us what the inflows of money. And you can see here recently that this is what spurned that headline. 2 days ago, they had another $10 million that was minted of their WLF token. And it is notable because the Trump family is taking the funds that they get from these additional mints. And again, 300 million was their goal. They're now just cresting 65 million. They're taking the ETH, or sorry, they already have ETH, but they're taking the USD, USDT, and there was another token that they actually minted for, and they're immediately swapping it for Ethereum and upping their total allocation that they have. So now the wallet that governs this protocol that these guys control, as they sell off these WLF tokens, which again, non-transferable, at least that's what it was on launch. I don't know if that's still the case. I believe that's still going. They are using that money and swapping for native assets. So Ethereum, Link was in there, and a few others going through CowSwap. And it's just notable because they're not holding on to USD. They're not holding on to what would be perceived as the strong currency, and they're swapping for native assets, Link, Ethereum, whatever. And it's just a signal that they believe that they want to be deeper ingrained in the crypto ecosystem. So caught some people's attention. People are getting excited about it. And mostly it's just a signal to like the overall network effects of what these large ecosystems have, right? So like it's kind of this is a background note, right? But you think about the people that have been in the Ethereum ecosystem for a very long time. They are now the people that are coaching these Trump teams to actually do this stuff, right? To build, to point, to say, hey, no, you don't do that on Ethereum L1. It's the most decentralized, most whatever. It's the best programmable ecosystem that you have. And that's just like, this is the non-direct impact of something being around for so long, a lot of wealth being created by people, and those people having like proliferated throughout many ecosystems. And they're just going to point people back to this because they're incentivized to do so. So yeah, it's just that's something to take note of.
Love it. Great summary of precisely what happened and the numbers and the breakdown. I wanted to share this tweet from DC Investor. Obvious ETH bull sometimes gets some pushback for being so bullish ETH specifically. But I think some of what he's saying has validity here. He said, because this was some separate news, although it kind of feeds into this bullishness about ETH being the home for this type of activity. Said $20 billion in USDT brought onto Ethereum in the past month. That is an insane amount. The interesting thing is once stables are brought onto these networks, they mostly stick around even in a bear market, percolating through that chain's economy and DeFi apps. We have reached a turning point where users of these assets want the decentralization and extreme strong liquidity of Ethereum L1 with the ability to distribute and bridge them to L2s and use them there with minimal fees. So this was reported 22 hours ago, that there were $20 billion more dollars minted to Ethereum over the past month, which is pretty damn significant, Brad. A quick word to that kind of overall amount of money getting minted to ETH. Maybe that's just in line with the general points you've been making.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to know, because on a side of that is the ETFs, right? We've seen the ETF inflows have been pretty remarkable for both Bitcoin and Ethereum, but particularly Ethereum. So like you're starting to see some green shoots, hoping for just a little bit more of a recovery, right? He's been beaten up the last frankly, last 2 years ish relative to the souls and the Bitcoins of the world. So people are kind of waiting and seeing this stuff and hoping that like maybe this is its time to shine.
Like it. I don't know if we need a disclosure for the ETH stuff, to be honest. I feel like we're all quite ETH aligned, even though we do stuff on every single chain and take opportunities wherever we see it. I always want to see ETH win. I know a lot of people, piled into the Sol trade because that was clear. It was the correct trade to make if you're a pure trader. But I'm, honestly quite a big believer in ETH for all the reasons that Brad had already described as well. So look, we've got just a few minutes left for today. I think we've dealt with the main things, but it would be wrong not to go to the Penguins. I know that we've been talking about them the last couple of days. They did hit a very significant milestone yesterday as they passed a 100 ETH floor, $100,000 floor to about 27 ETH. Sam, do you just want to give us a quick headline here? Any other interesting thoughts or conclusions that you saw other people drawing on the timeline? What's your thinking here?
Yeah, so there's I guess there's 4 tweets that probably just quick snapshot through. There's 2 from Cirrus, one of which is related to he acquired a bunch of Pengus a little while ago, and he was saying that if he just held them rather than flipping them for a 25% profit, it would have been like an $8 million trade. So yeah, pretty insane.
8-figure, I think he said.
8-figure, yeah. Yeah, close either or. Is pretty impressive nonetheless. But then there was also, so Kevin WSH Pod, there's like a prominent YouTuber, has a Pudgy profile picture as well. So he interviewed both 9gag and also Luca. So the conversation with 9gag's kind of lent into the whole network effects of having a Pudgy and the access that gives you. And 9gag went through like a plethora of purchases back in, I think it was 2021, 2022, basically got access to all these communities by acquiring these NFTs. Yes, a lot of them went to zero, but he holds several Pudgies, and I think that kind of outperforms it. But also it means that like what he uses a reference of, okay, we'll say, how do you do that with Amazon? Like there's no way you get a direct line to Jeff Bezos. And I'm not comparing like Luca to Jeff Bezos at this stage, but like the bigger this gets, the less accessible it's going to become. And I think that access is going to come with a premium, which I think will be baked into these big Pudgy or maybe even the little Pudgy prices. So it's just an interesting observation there. And then Luca touches on, like, he references some price action. So, I mean, even you slipped to the tongue to 100 ETH, but he's suggesting a potential 200 ETH floor. So it's like, okay, well, like we saw apes run to, I don't even, like it was at 500K. I don't even know what in terms of ETH, but there is precedence for it. And I think with reference to these previous tweets to like GCR that has significant capital, the network effects, like you could quite easily see history rhyme. And with the Pengu token launching, I know a lot of people are looking to snipe it rather than dump it. So like who knows where this goes, irrespective of whether it's on Solana or ETH. Like the whole aggregation across chain for liquidity as well is an interesting play. It's like, okay, well, we know the market, we know where certain assets perform better. We're going to play into that. But it doesn't mean that we're not going to deploy on abstract. It doesn't mean that we're not going to like stay on ETH as like a secure play. So it's just interesting to see all those observations and kind of statements on the timeline from various people.
I love it. I don't think there's much more to say beyond that, right? Like the price is the price. It's obviously a very significant achievement. There has been that interesting commentary, which you rightfully pointed out. The only additional thing I'd add is that I'd actually never heard this clip before. I shared it with someone quite prominent in the space who was not familiar with it. I don't know whether as a founder, sometimes you say things in podcasts. We even had this yesterday, Sam, where I said something and then like the person who it was about tweeted us after the show. It's like, look, this is our job. We're just like saying things sometimes. Yes, we mean what we say, but we don't always phrase it perfectly. And things can get clipped and taken out of context later, and it can come back to you. this is obviously part of a, for the context, when Luca made this 200 ETH, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a prediction, more just like a 200 ETH aspiration, maybe. It's part of a longer interview where he kind of explained that vision. And the reason why, his explanation for it, if you watch the clip, and I'm showing it on the screen for the people who are watching in. This is from Kevin. It's at Kevin WSH Pod. It's actually from a podcast in July, so it was a long time ago. But the reason why he thinks things can go to that price is because of the unlocks in leverage. So he was referencing a protocol like Wasabi, where you could go long and short NFTs. Probably, although he didn't mention it, something like Blend as well right now, where you can buy on leverage. And I know multiple people doing that. So that unlock of leverage means that you can probably push these higher depending on market sentiment as well. So that's that. Pretty bullish to end the show. Obviously things are heating up though, and I think FOMO is increasing, prices are going higher. Just be responsible, do what you need to do your own research, take responsibility for your own actions on chain. I think we're going to an exciting period, but I hope everything we're sharing is providing some interesting analysis and context for people to make the right decisions for themselves. But that is our show for today. Hope you enjoyed it. As always, reminder, we do this every single day, Monday to Friday for 1 hour at 7 a.m. Eastern time. We're live on X video, and YouTube, of course, if you prefer video. And if you want to catch up with us on Apple, Spotify podcasts, you can find us there. Thanks again to Sam and Brad for co-hosting. As always, that was pretty good. Thanks so much for Phunky for his usual contribution. Shout out to our YouTube commenters who you can't get much past. This is like high quality information / shitposting, which is the best combination. Shout out to you guys. Have a wonderful day. Take care. We will be back with you tomorrow, and see you then. Bye-bye.